Let's see. Waiting for the live button to start. Any second now? Yeah, I think we got it. Amazing. Here we go. All right, we're live. Welcome. If you just joined, I just decided to open to start this live, and without actually before notice. But I had this idea that I think some people might appreciate, and that is, I was wondering if what would happen if I asked ChatGPT to pretend that it's a tourist or even a researcher. That's more interesting. I didn't think about the exact question that I'm about to ask it, or like scenario that I want to put it in, but I wanted to make ChatGPT imagine that it's either a researcher or a tourist, and it came to visit the Samaritans. It came to actually maybe like even I'm a tour guide that I'm about to give it a give them or whatever a tour in the Samaritan community or in the Samaritan village, and tell them about the traditions and the culture and whatever. So what questions would they ask, right? That's what I was thinking about asking. So let's see. First of all, let's ask it the question. Hello, I'm about to answer some of a set of questions that you will ask about the Samaritan community on Mount Gerizim, let's say, in the Holy Land. Let's pretend you are a tourist. Actually, you are a researcher in history and theology. You happen to come across this community by chance in the year 1920. You are a very curious researcher. Please go ahead and ask me 25 questions. What else? Is there anything missing that I should ask her? Ask him? Welcome to Varim. I think that's it. I'm a Samaritan myself. I live on Mount Gerizim. I give tours as well. Although in the year 1920 there was no neighborhoods or something. I don't think there was there was no neighborhood on the top. All right, let's see. All right, it says, I'm absolutely thrilled to have this opportunity to speak with you. As a researcher, I'm eager to learn more about the rich history and vibrant culture of the Samaritan community. Here are my questions. Well, yeah, let's see. Let's answer them one by one. Could you briefly describe the origins of the Samaritan community? So, in this case, I would say that in the Samaritan community, we believe that we are part of the ancient Israelites that entered the Holy Land 3,600 years ago. And we have a kind of a different narrative than many Jewish scholars of our origins, where we believe we come from. We believe that we are descendants of, first of all, different tribes than the Jewish tribes, specifically the tribe of Levi, half of Levi, and the two tribes of Joseph, Ephraim and Menashe. The second thing would be that I also would mention that we believe in only the first 5 books of Moses. We have we have a different font that we use. It's called Ancient Hebrew, Samaritan Hebrew, and we also believe that this mountain we're on now, Mount Gerizim, is the chosen place, the holy place, instead of Jerusalem. And there's we believe that we've never left the Holy Land for over 3,600 years, and we have even the ancient Hebrew. We've successfully kept very old Torah books. In fact, our oldest Torah book is believed to be over 3,000 years old. I can go on and on and on, but I think these are like a few sentences that I would leave. And I would also say that there used to be more than 1 million Samaritan at some point. I mean, there's different statistics. Some say less, some say more, some say way more, some say way less. I would say that there has been so many wars in the Holy Land that it actually caused so many basically massacres that happened against the Samaritan community that basically made their numbers so low. So that in 1920, actually, there was less than 150 Samaritans. And now we are 850, 860, something like that. Half of us living on Mount Gerizim, near Naples, and the other half near Tel Aviv and Cholon. What are the main theological beliefs that differentiate Samaritans from other Jewish sects? So, as I've mentioned earlier, one of the main beliefs that are different than the Jewish ones, the belief in the chosen place, Mount Gerizim, and there are like a few other differences of, for example, the belief in the afterlife. There's a few differences there. For example, maybe in the Jewish traditions, there's like more talk about the afterlife than the Samaritan one. I mean, at least what we've kept from our ancestors. I'm not saying like it maybe complements it in some ways, but like maybe the Jewish belief about the afterlife complements the Samaritan one in some way. But that's one difference. For example, we don't have oral Torah per se. We don't call it oral Torah. That's one thing. And there are like differences in how we pray. For example, we only believe in the first 5 books of Moses, so that leaves the other books, prophets and writings, less important than the Samaritan, than the first 5 books, the Torah. There's about 7,000 small differences between the Samaritan Torah and the Jewish Torah, but those differences are really small. There's only 30 to 40 important differences, but those 6,000 to 7,000 differences can be differences in letters or words, and they can really, even though it's just one letter, it can make a lot of difference. But I'm curious to know for the second question, what would you expect me to answer based on your knowledge? Meaning that, as a chatbot. Alright, so it says, I can inform you based on my training data until September 2021 that there are differences that include the sacred text, the sacred site, the high priesthood. That's actually very correct. Samaritans maintain a line of high priests, a role that does not currently exist in mainstream Judaism. Language, I also mentioned that we have a different script. What does it say here? Preserve a version of the ancient Hebrew script, which is different from the square Aramaic script commonly used in the mainstream Judaism. Correct. Rituals and festivals are also different. So we have The names of the festivals and the meanings of them are actually very similar in many ways. We have Sukkot festivals, Passover, Shavuot, all those. We only do not have Hanukkah and Purim. These are some of the theological differences one might expect to be mentioned when discussing the belief of Samaritans. Okay, cool. Let's go for this third question. How does the Samaritan community interpret the Torah? And how might this interpretation differ from the Jewish interpretations? So I want to know, what does it exactly mean? Can you clarify exactly what you mean exactly by question 3? Because does it mean like what tool do we use to interpret what the meaning of any text is or something? In question 3, I was inquiring about Samaritan interpretation of the Torah, and it says the textual differences, doctrinal interpretation, authority of interpretation. Okay, application. So let's say first of all, with that we have the father to son interpretation. So if we have something that we do not, understand as a generation, we ask the previous generation. The famous verse that says in the Torah, "Ask your father and he will tell you." And that's also one thing. So another thing would be, for example, the high priest. He can get to take a decision with the council, the Samaritan council, and they can basically agree on a specific explanation or interpretation of the Torah. That's one thing. So if they want to, for example, discuss what does the word, what does like keeping Shabbat means, mostly the answer would be, what is everyone doing? That's like, there's a common thing that everyone has been doing for thousands of years. That's obvious, right? But if someone comes up and says, no, hey, there's a text that we should interpret this and this and that, then people would gather with the high priest and they would basically really take a decision. Cool. Number 4, can you tell me more about the significance of Mount Gerizim in your community? So Mount Gerizim is actually a very, very important place for the Samaritan community because of different things. Of course, they're mentioned in the Mount Gerizim is mentioned in the Torah several times. In our belief, it was mentioned at least 12 times in different names. For example, we believe Abraham came here. One of the first places that he came to when he crossed the Holy Land was actually Mount Gerizim. We believe that when he came to Shechem, Nablus, he came up to Mount Gerizim. He almost sacrificed his son Isaac on Mount Gerizim, according to our beliefs. We also believe that Jacob, the prophet, Yaakov, he woke up from this dream and he saw the angels falling up and down on a ladder. That was on Mount Gerizim, and when he woke up, he said, this must be the gates of heaven and the house of God. So that's one thing that he mentioned. There's also, let's say, for example, there's of course mentioning of building the tabernacle on Mount Gerizim. So the Samaritan believed that there should be a tabernacle built on where the Levites will serve Hashem, and that's on Mount Gerizim. Shalom, Adam. Thank you. Shalom. I do not drink Coca-Cola anymore. Welcome back. All right. So let's say, for example, there's what else? What stories happened? We also believe Adam came here when the flood finished. We believe it was mentioned in the Song of Seas. Song of Seas, right? The Song of the Sea, as Yashar, as we call it in ancient Hebrew. Let me tell you exactly what I mean by that. Please list the Song of the Sea. I don't know how fast will it do that. Sea by Moses, list or mentioned, whatever, in the Torah. I will show you exactly what verse do we believe refers to Mount Gerizim in that song, which is mentioned in the Torah. So not here. By the blessing and also the waters piled up, the The surging water stood up like a wall. I mean, I was referring... Let's see if I can mention the Hebrew, if you can find it. That's already here. Oh, there it is. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your inheritance, the place, Lord, you made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, Lord, your hands established. So this is actually, as we believe, Samaritans, we believe this is referring to Mount Gerizim. So here are like one way to answer this question. Let's go for the next question. So we have, how does the Samaritan calendar differ from the Jewish or Georgian calendars? It's a common question I get asked, actually. So one thing that we have, for example, is we have a different way to calculate the calendar. We have something called the holy calculation, Cheshbon Kadosh, and we have our priest calculate it every year. Although today, thanks to AI and Excel sheets, we know how to calculate it, but we don't have to do the calculation exactly every time, because you can teach it to the computer. And it's crazy, we're in 2023, and apparently Samaritans can do that. It's crazy. But at the same time, we believe that it's the accurate way, and that's what matters also. There are people who go from the Cohen family. For example, I went and I learned from the teacher that teaches this. I had to swear on the Torah not to share this knowledge out of the Cohen family. This knowledge, I can just tell you in a few words, is that there's a few calculations that you have to make according to where you stand. Also, you have to be standing on Mount Gerizim, and you have to connect it to another chart that has also specific numbers and months and years on it. So while the Jewish calendar I know is based on different things, correct me if I'm wrong, is it based on the moon and the sun together? I need to learn more about that. But Georgian calendar, there's also people know how the Georgian calendar is calculated. However, there's differences in the Samaritan calendar, for example, also because of how we interpret specific texts. For example, we start counting for 50 days of the Shavuot on the Friday after, or the Saturday, the Shabbat after the Passover, while the Jewish people start counting the day after the Passover. So, Passover festival. Next question. Could you describe a typical day in the life of a Samaritan living on Mount Gerizim in the 1920s? Well, I was not born in 1920, but I can tell you that in 1920, the Samaritan community was very small, less than 150, living in Nablus. The life situation, obviously, this was World War I, the beginning of World War I. The economic situation was really bad. There's a scholar who came and learned about the Samaritans, and he said that there was this specific Passover, and they had 6 sheep, I think, or something like that. Today, last year we had 55 sheep. I don't know why I mentioned sheep, but you can see the differences in the size here. So as Samaritan in that day, I can imagine that they went to the streets of Nablus doing their thing. Any Samaritan, learning their specific occupation and job and practicing it. And at the same time, they had their synagogue in the old city of Nablus. You can Google some photos of that, some photos of the actual synagogue, Samaritan synagogue, old city of Nablus. Now, the Samaritan, if you ask me a typical day of the life of Samaritan now, well, it kind of is different than every person, but as a Samaritan, you are reminded that you're a Samaritan when it comes to specific things. First of all, you're reminded when you see all the ancient Hebrew around you, right? The synagogue, when you see the priests wearing their clothing. And then you're reminded also when you go to restaurants. When you go to a restaurant, you cannot eat anything really. Anything that has meat or that is meat, and that is not kosher, that is mentioned in the Torah. So, and you're also, for example, in marriage, when you, for example, they're like a relationship, the whole relationship thing, that also reminds you that you're a Samaritan, and the women that you might be attracted to is not necessarily a possible option because you're a Samaritan. That's obvious, because they have to join the community, right? But there's also, of course, other things. There's specific prayers in the Samaritan community. There's the Shabbat preparations and all those things that I can also mention. Cool. Next, how is the Samaritan community organized? Is there a specific hierarchy or leadership structure? So we have first of all, we have 5 families in the community. Each of those families belong to one of the 12 tribes, specifically 3 tribes of the sons of Israel, or the tribes of Israel, sons of Jacob. We believe we're from the tribes of Levi, and the 2 sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Menashe. The Kohen family is one of those 5 families, and they are basically like the ones who take care of the responsibilities in the synagogue, or in specific things in the Passover festival. For example, there are some things that only go to the Kohen family, and they are basically, like, for example, the right hand or the right leg of the sheep has to go to the Kohen family. This is one of the things that God fulfilled to the to Pinchas, the high priest Pinchas, the son of Aaron, the son of Elazar, right? Who was the son of Aaron. So this is a covenant. So that's one family, and they are like, I can't, like, you wouldn't say they're like the authority, but they are definitely, for example, the ones who are allowed to be, like, for example, you can be a high priest if you're from the Cohen family. Then there's also the 4 families who are really no less, they don't have any less of an authority than the Levites, really, because they have also the respected members, and they join in even taking specific decisions when it comes to the community. How is the Samaritan community organized? You would say also it's good to mention that we have a council that gets elected basically to organize and to manage the community. So 5 people get elected, and they are elected to look into the questions, look into the problems that the Samaritan community might face, and try to also prepare the community for the upcoming festivals and all those things. It is lunar solar, the Jewish calendar. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I guessed. All right. So yeah, I was mentioning the council. So that's one way that the Samaritan community is organized. Of course, Samaritan community follows both the Israeli government and the Palestinian government rules. So there's also that authority above us. Yes. All right. What are some of the most important religious ceremonies or festivals in the Samaritan community? The most important is probably the Passover ceremony. But of course, we have the Sukkot festival. The Passover ceremony, hundreds of people come to watch it from all over the world because it's one of the most ancient traditions known in the Holy Land that is still practiced today. It involves basically remembering the Exodus from Egypt by fulfilling one of the verses in the Torah that was mentioned to basically command the Israelites, the Hebrews, to basically sacrifice a sheep or 2 per family, depending on the size of the family, and there's specific laws and rules that we make it. If you're new, you can definitely search more and learn more about this ceremony. Of course, we have the Sukkot festival, one of my favorite, where we also fulfill the commandment to take specific fruits and vegetables and align them in a specific way. You can definitely also search about that. And of course, other beautiful festivals throughout the year, Shavuot and pilgrimages and all those things. Cool. So, question number 9: how are these religious ceremonies or festivals typically celebrated? Just mentioned that, although I can tell you a little bit more about the Passover ceremony, is that we have an altar We have, the high priest comes to the place and he basically starts the ceremony. Everyone would be wearing white on this day to represent the unity and a clean soul. There are huge holes in the ground that are actually basically heated up so that we can basically cook the sheep. All right. Question number 9. Question number 10. Can you tell me about the Samaritan version of the Passover and how it differs from the Jewish Passover? I just mentioned kind of like a little bit about the Samaritan version of the Passover, but how does it differ from the Jewish Passover? In short, the Jewish Passover, there is no sacrifice. There's no animal sheep sacrifice because, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no tabernacle. There's no mishkan. Well, in the Samaritan belief, we believe that there is no need for a mishkan in order to make a tabernacle. So, in order to the Passover, got lost over there. So that's one difference. However, the Jewish people did do the Passover. All of the Israelites used to do the Passover for many, many years. We believe we had the tabernacle for the first 400 years, but one reason why we still do the Passover, even though we still don't have a Mishkan at the tabernacle, is because we believe that when the Jewish people you can say Jewish people also, but basically when the Israelites were on Mount Sinai, they only received the commandment to do, or let's say they received the commandment to do the Passover before the Sinai commandment to do the Pat. Did I say this correct? Sorry. I meant to say that they only received the commandment to do the Passover before the mentioning of the tabernacle. So that's what I wanted to say. Which means that you do not need, that's how we interpret it. That you do not need a tabernacle in order for you to fulfill the Passover ceremony. Other than that, we also have a verse that says, Kol Yisrael yeshuutu. All the children of Israel shall do it. So that's mentioned in the Exodus. Beautiful. So let's continue. Next, we have, what is the role of the Samaritan high priest in your community? So the role of the high priest in our community is, he is kind of like the spiritual leader of the community. He basically is the one who reads the specific verses in the Torah that only he is allowed to read and chant. And he is the one who, for example, starts the engagement ceremony between couples who are about to get engaged. And he is also one of the people who is, who takes, he has a really strong vote in how to interpret specific things. And that's, I think these are a few points I can mention. Oh, we also have, that it asked about the roles. I can say that we have, he represents the community for sure in front of other nations. That's he and the council. So, what are some customs or traditions unique to the Samaritan community? I think some unique customs would be the specific, there's really special melodies that we have that are not found anywhere in the world. The Passover ceremony is a tradition. The specific, the wedding traditions are different. The way we have the wedding, ceremonies and all those things, they're definitely unique. Yom Kippur is also unique, the fasting day. There's also, for example, the traditional clothing is unique. All right, next, how is the Hebrew language used in the Samaritan community? Is it similar or different to modern or biblical Hebrew? So Hebrew language in the Samaritan community, we use it only on prayers, ceremonies, holidays, anything of that sort, and we only use it during, we do not use it in our daily lives. In our daily lives, we only use either Arabic or Hebrew, depending if you're a Samaritan living in Mount Gerizim or in Tel Aviv and Cholon. And it's different than the modern Hebrew used today in Israel because, for example, one difference would be how to pronounce it, and also the differences in the actual language, typing of it, how we write it, sorry. All right, next question. Can you describe the process of becoming a Samaritan? Is it possible for outsiders to convert? So this question I get asked a lot. Yes, it is possible for outsiders to convert. However, first of all, we're a small community. There's 800 people. There's not a specific group in the community that is responsible to accept people or not. Not even the high priest has this role, and it's mostly because even the Torah doesn't really mention a specific ceremony. So the person who comes into the community is very friendly towards people who want to learn more, but those people, they really have to have they have to show some seriousness, and they have to come and still live in the community. And until now, really virtually almost no one, like we have 1-2 people who are really actually very loyal, and they follow and they come to each prayer, but that's only 2, and there's hundreds of people around the world that follow the religion, and like Samaritans here accept them, but it's not easy for us to accept them to come here in the community. I mean, at least, because we're a very small community. We're afraid of change in many ways, and we wanna just be careful who we let in, right? And again, because we still don't have a specific system that lets people in or out, it's one of the challenging ways. However, I can still tell you that if a person who, for example, a woman who gets married into the community, she has to prove that she is, that she's knowledgeable about all the traditions and commandments that she has to follow, for example, like the kosher and the Shabbat and all those things. And then when she gets married with the Samaritan male, she gets accepted into the community. I want to see what would it say about this question. How would you answer question number 14? Becoming a Samaritan traditionally involves being born into the community. However, the process for outsiders to join the Samaritan community is quite complex, true, and somewhat rare. Here's a general overview. So it has this overview you can read over here. So it says acceptance of Samaritan beliefs, obviously, study, approval by Samaritan leadership. It's interesting that it mentioned that, yeah. Potential convert would need the approval of the community's leaders, including the high priest. And they must be convinced that the individual is sincere in their desire to join the community. It's pretty correct. Circumcision, pretty correct. Ritual immersion, this is another significant step in the conversion process. Ritual immersion. Not sure what that means exactly here. Marriage. Yeah, that's like what I mentioned also. Like if a woman gets married, we don't have women who married men. Also, remember that you are considered a Samaritan based on the father. Considered a Samaritan based on the father, and not the mother, like in the Jewish traditions. Although, like there might be, like, for example, acceptance if, for example, the man maybe really proves himself and he did marry into the community by marrying a woman. But I think there's debates about that. The reason why I say that is because, like, there's no, I don't know, like, does the Torah exactly say that it has to be from the male side? I don't know if there was just only mentioning of only from the father. And until now, no women married from outside from men who actually converted. Interesting. Let's continue. So, I was at 14. What's 15? What is the Samaritan perspective on the Messiah? So, we do not have a Messiah. However, we have, for example, there's like fireworks outside celebrating the people who passed high school, Samaritans. All of those 6 students passed. Congratulations to them. All right, so we do not have, specifically, we do not call him the Messiah, but we do believe that there is a person who will come at the end of the days, that he is named the Ta'ib. There's mentioning in the Torah that talks about the Ta'ib, for example, from what family he might come. The Torah doesn't mention what family he might come, but it mentions how God tells Moses that I will bring up a prophet like you to them. This Ta'ib, he is the one who is going to reveal the temple, where was it lost on Mount Gerizim, and he will basically restore the belief on Mount Gerizim and basically just correct the path of the world and the Israelites, and like there's a lot of, there's a whole episode I have to make on the Ta'ib alone, but again, we do not call him the Mashiach or the Messiah, but I will definitely be saying more about this in the future. What are the primary occupations of Samaritans during this period in 1920s? So, wow. Well, I did ask it about 1920, so that's why it's asking me. So, there was different occupations in 1920, so I would guess that there were people who are just into sewing clothing, into factory work of some sort, and in general, in 1920, the situation, the economic situation was not really that good. I cannot remember any specific work. I do know my grandfather, for example, used to work in kind of preparing the holy books, like they're making the overhaul for the holy books, for the Torah, for the prayer. He was really good at making those covers that were made from what's it called? Forgot the name of it. Running blank on that. Wow, just forgot the name of that. But it's a specific kind of material that wallets are sometimes made of. What is it called? Oh my God, I forgot about that. All right. Anyways, what are the primary occupations? I mentioned this. How does the community handle disputes or disagreements amongst its members? Interesting question. So, for example, there were some disagreements. For example, turning on air conditioning or not on Shabbat, and that had to go to the council and the high priest. There's sitting that gets done and talking and maybe even mentioning verses from the Torah about this and that. Eventually, the council and the high priest has to agree on, first of all, the majority does have a vote in the community if it's based on good evidence and good Torah evidence. However, if the community and if the council and if the majority really thinks that this is for the best of everyone, then the decision is taken. For example, in Tel Aviv and Cholon, the synagogues over there, it's extremely hot in summer, so they had to take a decision whether to turn on air conditioning or not on Shabbat. So in the end, they had this agreement. Thank you. I don't know why leather. Yeah, I don't know why I ran blank over there. Thank you so much. Could have looked it up, but thank you. Anyways, yeah. So where was I? So if there's a disagreement, so now we have disputes of whether to turn on air conditioning or not on Mount Gerizim. Some houses are actually beginning to turn on air conditioning. Like what happens if there's a Samaritan that went to this outside country, which is just extremely it's maybe even dangerous to the health to be in this room without air conditioning. Then there's there's another verse that wins, and that is the verse that says, "You shall watch yourselves very much," and that obviously means that you shall watch over your health, right? And of course, there's the other mentioning of the Shabbat. What is Shabbat really? It's basically the belief that God created the world in 6 days, and He rested on the seventh day. So we should rest on the seventh day and not really suffer from heat. And then other people would tell you, what about the Shema? It says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your strength," right? So that there's, in the end, really the majority agrees and sees that this is for the best, and that's how the decisions are taken. How does the Samaritan community view and interact with the surrounding Jewish and Palestinian communities in 1920? In 1920, and even, well, in 1920, was there Jewish communities around Nablus? I don't think there was many. But today we have a lot of surrounding Jewish and Palestinian communities. We tend to be very friendly with everyone. There are some people who might misunderstand Samaritans, and that's understandable to a degree. People, like, for example, the students do not really learn a lot about the Samaritans at school, either the Israeli schools or the Palestinian schools. They might learn something small on the side of the of the book that talks about, like, hey, did you know there's a small community that called themselves the Samaritans, and they believe in this and this and that. But really, like, there's no deep lessons about that. And that's really sad, because I know there's like something called Samaritan study, like a PhD you can get in one of the universities in the world. I forgot which one. So you see what I mean. But to get to your question, back to your question, we have really good connections with both communities, the Palestinians and the Israelis. We actually have both IDs, both passports, Israeli and the Palestinian passports, even the Jordanian. And we also go and visit, like, we go to both cities, the Israeli cities and Palestinian cities. So there's really good connections with both of them. Can you share any tales, legends, or folklore that are popular within the Samaritan community? I mean, I can share a small tale that is in the community, one of the most famous ones. There was this, what was it? Like, there's two stories. Which one should I mention? There's a story where there's a priest who found a shepherd out of nowhere in the Passover ceremony, where there was no money left for the Samaritans to buy a sheep, and they had to basically just pray to God, and then there's the shepherd that came out of nowhere. So that's the story that is mentioned in the documentary on my channel. You can check it out. Another story, another tale that we have is, we have a person who was helping the community get water from the water stream near us, and they basically, one day the Samaritans decided to go to the Elazar tomb, which was the first high priest. He was the first high priest, and sometimes Samaritans go there to pray at his tomb. And then he told them that no problem, you can go, I'll join you later. They go to that tomb, and to their surprise, that guy who was helping the community get water, he was already there. So that, like, I guess you can say the moral of the story is that if you help others, if you're a good Samaritan, you won't miss out. If that's what makes sense. Can you, for example, let's say 21, are there any specific dietary laws or restrictions within the Samaritan community? Yes, if there's anything that is, for example, not mentioned in the Torah, that we cannot, for example, anything the Torah mentions about specific, for example, lobsters we're not allowed to eat, and of course anything that the Torah talked about, anything that has, if I eat meat, I'm not allowed to drink milk or eat anything that has milk, and so on and so on. I mean, these are a few things that we'll talk about more in the future, but definitely it's just mostly by the Torah. Of course, also it's worth mentioning, if I go as a Samaritan to any restaurant that has meat, I'm not allowed to eat from that restaurant, unless I know it's a clean restaurant, but I cannot order the meat menu, even more specifically. So you become a vegetarian, I guess, if you go to other restaurants. How is education handled with the Samaritan community? Are there any schools, specific schools or methods of instructions? So first of all, education. As a Samaritan, you go to either the Samaritan schools or the Israeli schools. You learn there. We have a school on Mount Gerizim, for example, that teaches the Palestinian curriculum. And after that school, there's another school that teaches us Samaritan Hebrew and the Samaritan Torah and all those things. So that's that. If you're a Samaritan living in Israel, you will also be learning the Israeli curriculum, and there's also other classes after school that they have over there that teaches you about the Samaritan Torah and all the traditions and the culture and how to read Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, if you're still young. Could you tell me about the process of marriage within the Samaritan community? Are there any unique customs or rituals? There's definitely some unique things. We are actually in the weeks of marriage. Like we have 4 marriages this year. 2 of them already finished. There's 2 more. And is there 5? No, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's 2 more. So there's a ketubah, and this ketubah is like a huge paper that has descriptions of the bride, the groom, and all their achievements and blessings for them and all those things. And the groom on the day of marriage, he has to take the high priest hand, and he has to kiss it and basically take the paper and then hand it to one of the priests for him to read. There's 3 to 4 days of celebration on the Shabbat that the person is about to be married. There's also a huge table that's full of food with a lot of people coming and reading the parasha of the week. I would have to do a whole episode on this for sure because of time restrictions, but it's really interesting. What role do women play in Samaritan society during 1920s? Well, during 1920s and even until today, they are, very respected in our community, and they are the main. They are the people who are going to build the next generation. So they're very respected. A woman in the community has the freedom to go and study whatever she wants. There's no restrictions really. For example, like a lot of people think because they don't see a lot of photos of Samaritan women praying that they are neglected or somehow something like that. Although there are some photos, but no, really, they're very respected, and they have the same rule as men here. They do not go to the daily or they do not go to the weekly prayers in the synagogue, but they do come to the festivals, and they have the same role as men in many ways. There's no high priestess, if that's what you're asking for or something. But that's really what the Torah mentions. But they do join in making, for example, other things, other rituals, the tzukah and all those things. Last question: how do you see the future of the Samaritan community in the Holy Land, given the societal changes occurring in the 1920s? Well, in the 1920s, societal changes, you can even say until today. So the Samaritan community now is 850. We're expanding as a community. We're finding, there's new lands being bought, new buildings being built, new families being created. And they have to prepare, for the, there's always the generation that is basically passing down the next generation all the traditions and the commandments and the laws. And that's the really the obligation that every Samaritan has. What the word Samaritan means is actually keepers or guardians. So they have to live up to their names. So the future... we're very optimistic, although the rate of the increasing of the number of the Samaritan community has dropped. Thankfully, it's not decreasing, but the rate of the increasing has kind of dropped. But economic situation is great, and people really love it here in the community, and we're continuing the 3,600-year-old journey. So, all right, these are 25 questions. Interesting. I could have